Do you think this society is too highly sexualized? And do you wish you could solve this problem? If yes, welcome to the pure love marriage revolution, where we strengthen marriages, we build families and communities, and renew the nation and the world. Thank you so much for being here. I believe that together we can end a lot of the suffering and confusion going on right now in this world. And we can build the world that we truly want. This presentation is the first in a series of 3. In this session, we are exploring the problem, the impact of sexual freedom on the individual, the family, the community, the society, and the nation. We are presenting a unique perspective, one that most people have never heard of. In the second presentation, we'll introduce 5 revelations on how to build a society filled with marriages that last, starting from our own. The 5 revelations that have helped me and my husband, 2 people who never intended to marry in the first place, build a loving marriage of now over 40 years. We are immensely grateful. The third presentation will outline how this solution is being successfully implemented worldwide, step by step, one couple at a time. Yes, we are living in a hopeful time. This first presentation is heavy, but it is important because if we want to change our present reality, we must understand it. Are you ready? Do you have your cup of coffee, your water, the chocolate milk? All right, let's start. The decline of prosperous nations. Part 1. Why sexual morality may be far more important than we ever thought. Once a beacon of hope for people worldwide, America today stands at a critical moment of her history. As the society seems more and more tolerant towards and even promotes unrestrained sexualization, breaking families apart, and confusing individuals to extremes, we have reasons to be apprehensive about the future of this country. However, amidst this uncertainty, the pure love marriage revolution, a worldwide family movement, presents a visionary path forward, offering solutions to solve our national and worldwide family crises. Philosophers and social scientists have long been fascinated by the impact of the family on society. Sociologist Brigitte Berger says, family systems provide the foundations from which culture and civilizations arise. The family is a culture-creating institution par excellence. We have heard many times before that the family is a cornerstone of society and that peace starts at home, in the family. That when a family is strong, society prospers. But when a family breaks down, the society breaks down with it. This is a quote from US President Lyndon Johnson. The family is a cornerstone of our society. More than any other force, it shapes the attitude, the hopes, the ambitions, and the values of the child. And when the family collapses, it is the children that are usually damaged. When it happens on a massive scale, the community itself is crippled. So, unless we work to strengthen the family, all the rest, school, playground, public assistance, and private concerns will never be enough. The married family is profoundly important for a stable society, says British anthropologist Joseph Unwin. Could it be that our American society is in trouble because our marriages are in trouble? The United States of America has been built by imperfect people, so it is not without imperfections and historical missteps. Nevertheless, rooted in strong belief in God and traditional family values, in less than 200 years, America became the most stable, the most prosperous, and the most altruist nation on earth, attracting immigrants and refugees worldwide. Sadly, today in America, this is our reality. For months recently, American cities had protests and riots, doors and windows shattered, and buildings set on fire. Schools and libraries sexualizing our children. Parents, mothers, are you sure you're aware of what your children are being taught in the classroom? What are they saying? Where are they going? What are they teaching the new generation? And when we thought it couldn't get any worse, we have driven God out of our public squares, out of our schools, out of our culture, out of our lives. We have embraced the ways of immorality. We have called evil good and good evil. How in the world did we get here? There is an English quote that says, "In the fruit of prosperity are seeds of destruction." In the fruit of prosperity are seeds of destruction. It seems that as nations develop economically, inevitably they collapse morally, which is followed by an economic collapse. It has happened over and over and over again in history. Arnold Toynbee, a British historian, drew this conclusion. Out of 21 notable civilizations, 19 perished not by conquest from without, but by moral decay from within. We must solve this problem. How? Let me ask you a question. Does God know how we can solve this problem? And does God want to help us solve this problem? The question we need to ask is, why is it that nations that are rich, healthy, and prosperous all end up collapsing? To answer this question, we must first understand why some societies develop, flourish, and become prosperous, while others never do, even after thousands of years. The answer is astonishing, and at the end of the day, quite simple. It was discovered by British anthropologist Joseph Unwin in a study of 6 major civilizations and 80 lesser societies covering 5,000 years of history. Joseph Unwin was a professor at Oxford and Cambridge University in the early 20th century. Unwin was a student of Freud. He estimated that religion had too much influence over the sexual relationship and that it had created undue and negative pressure upon society. As an anthropologist, he thought that a fair study of history would prove to the religious community and to the world the importance of sexual freedom. So, he embarked on a study of 80 primitive tribes and 6 known civilizations over the span of 5,000 years, a study that took him 7 years. And to his great surprise, he found the opposite to be true. He was honest, and he published his study under the title Sex and Culture. This was 1934. Have you ever heard of this book? The media has shown no interest in it. Nicknamed the Lost Sex Study, his research startled many scholars, above all Unwin himself, because all of the 86 societies that he carefully examined demonstrated a direct tie between monogamy and the development of civilization. Unwin had no Christian convictions and applied no moral judgment. He says, I offer no opinion about rightness or wrongness. The following slide is the third most important slide of this presentation. Quote, the whole of human history does not contain a single instance of a group becoming civilized unless it has been absolutely monogamous. Nor is there any example of a group retaining its culture after it has adopted less rigorous customs. In other words, Unwin discovered that prosperous civilizations are built on strict sexual standards. Unwin also discovered the reasons why those prosperous civilizations at some point all ended up projecting absolute monogamy. We will cover this in a second presentation. Let's go a little deeper. Unwin discovered something astonishing, in my opinion, something eye-opening, groundbreaking. Unwin divided societies into 4 groups based on their sexual regulations: zoistic societies, manistic societies, deistic, and rationalistic societies. A zoistic society does not practice any form of prenuptial chastity. They live in a condition of animal solidarity, displaying no energy or no cultural achievement. In other words, zoistic societies do not develop even after thousands of years. Manistic societies adopted occasional continence, and they started to develop a little. On the other hand, deistic societies insisted on prenuptial chastity, and they became prosperous and great historical civilizations. Then, for some reason that we will study later in a second presentation, deistic societies turn into rationalistic societies that reject absolute monogamy and collapse after 3 generations. Here's an example of a zoistic society that you may have heard about, the Ache people, an indigenous tribe in eastern Paraguay. In 1960, when both men and women were free to change partners at will. Listen to the account of a man from the Ache people as told to anthropologists. I customarily killed old women. They all died there by the big river. I didn't used to wait until they were completely dead to bury them. The women were afraid of me. Now, here, with the whites, I have become weak. He explained grandmothers helped with chores and babysitting, but when they got too old to be useful, you could not be sentimental. Babies born without hair, who were considered undeveloped, were killed immediately, etc., etc., etc. Now let's take 3 examples among the great civilizations of the past. Let's start by ancient Greece, the cradle of Western civilization. As we can see here on the map, ancient Greece was not just a nation, it was an empire. For example, in its early days, Athens was a beautiful and busy city, where marriage was evidently a union of great stability. They were absolutely monogamous, and marriage was a lifelong union. However, by the end of the 5th century BC, the old customs had disappeared. There were no more compulsory abstinence before marriage. Sexual desires could be satisfied in a direct manner, and divorce became easy and common. What happened then? The energy of the Athenians declined. 3 generations later, the once vigorous city, torn by dissension, was subject to a foreign master. Let's go to Babylon. From Isaiah 13:19, Babylon, the jewel of kingdoms, the pride and glory of the Babylonians. Babylonian society was the richest, most civilized society in the world for many years. They were deistic and absolutely monogamous. However, in late Babylonia, sexual standards became so loose that no full divorce, alimony, child support, and marital rape laws were established. Soon after, this empire that had lasted hundreds of years collapsed. What about the mighty Roman Empire? How did it become so majestic? Strict marital monogamy was central to social energy and growth. The mighty Roman Empire had the strongest army, the strongest economy, the biggest libraries. All roads led to Rome, remember? But the civilization collapsed, not from the outside, but from within. Wines, women, sexual orgies, and then the Roman Empire collapsed. That's history. Quote, those societies live in different geographical environments. They belong to different racial stocks, but the history of their marriage customs is the same. They all had the same ideas regarding sexual regulations. In summary, all the great civilizations of the past, with no exceptions, flourished during eras that adopted absolute monogamy. Inevitably, at some point in their development, sexual ethics would loosen and the societies would subsequently decline, only to rise again if and when they returned to rigid sexual standards. There was no exceptions. In conclusion, any human society is free to choose either to display great energy or to enjoy sexual freedom. The evidence is that it cannot do both for more than one generation. So what does this mean for us? It means that America is no exception. It means that the number one reason, the most fundamental reason, why America became the most prosperous country in the world in just 200 years is the tradition of strict sexual behavior that the Pilgrim Fathers brought to this continent. So tell me, what will happen to this country if we do not go back to traditional sexual ethics? Let's talk about the state of our American society today in terms of sexual morality. We speak a lot about abortion these days, don't we? But I have a question for you. Are we, religious people, are we addressing the problem correctly? I care about abortion, I really do. But I think that underneath abortion, there is a deeper problem that needs to be addressed. And when we do, we will slash the number of abortions by 80 to 90%. I suggest that the real issue is how did this new life start growing in this womb? How did this happen if it is unwanted? We are living in a cultural environment that is so obsessed with sex that people don't even know they have different options. I hear of Christian parents encouraging their children to date. They believe that if their child is not dating, he's not normal. And then they are surprised when their daughter comes back home pregnant. Who is the first victim here? Is it just the baby? Is it just also the mother? When we solve the deeper problem, the number of abortions will decrease dramatically. So why is this unwanted growing baby in the womb? What is the deeper problem? This brings us to the second part of this presentation. The decline of prosperous nations, the consequences of the sexual revolution, and how deeply it has affected our lives, our families, and our society. By bringing sex in the open, outside of marriage, the sexual revolution changed America, but not for the better. According to CDC, the Center for Disease Control, in 2020, more than 13% of women who obtained an abortion were married, and 86% were unmarried. In other words, almost 9 out of 10 abortions were performed outside of marriage. So, would it be right or wrong to conclude that sex outside of marriage is a leading cause of abortion? Let me ask again, what is the real problem here? Why is this unwanted new life in the womb? Sexual immorality. Right, you got it. Sexual immorality, the cultural phenomena that changed America for the worst. So if we were to remove the leading cause of abortion, we would slash over 80% of them right there. Is it worth it? Is it a good idea? What do you think? Is it worth our attention? Would you do it for your daughter? For your granddaughter? Yes, we must create a new culture, a pure culture. And the good news is that it has already started. And that is exciting. Here are 2 testimonials of young women who joined the pure love marriage revolution when they were young. Tiffany says, "When I look into my husband's eyes and know he has saved all of his heart and all of his love for me, I feel so grateful that he protected me from STDs and all of the pain and heartache that goes with it." Claire from Columbus, Ohio says, "My husband and I were both taught as we were growing up to remain sexually pure and be abstinent till we got married. Our relationship is stronger because of it. I know lots of childhood friends who went the other route and now have broken relationships and kids on top of that. I am sure many factors are involved in every situation, but it's clear now more than ever that staying sexually pure has benefited my life immensely." Besides the trauma of abortion, what else does sex out of marriage do? 2 ills first come to our minds: sexually transmitted diseases and single motherhood. Each year, 19 million new cases of STDs are contracted. half of them are among the youth. 80% of unwed fathers don't marry the teen mother of their baby. 80% of unwed teens mothers eventually receive welfare. 70% of them receive no financial support from the father of their children. I respect the strength of single parents very much. Many are raising incredible children. However, is it our first choice? Is it the best for the child? In 2020, more than 40% of all births in America were out of wedlock, which was close to 1.5 million of them. Often those children don't know who their father is. Schools have seen a sharp increase in the number of children who cannot name both their parents. Is this the kind of world we want our children and grandchildren to live in? There is a third problem with sex outside of marriage, one that society has not even begun to address, nor can it. Sex outside of marriage damages our ability to bond and form a lifelong attachment to our mate. To understand this, we will have to examine what happens in our brains during sexual activity on a neurochemical. Since neurochemicals strengthen the bonds we have with others, there are awful consequences when a relationship ends. Sexually active teen girls were shown to have 3 times as likely to report that they are depressed all or most of the time and to have attempted suicide as compared to girls who are still abstinent. And it's pretty much the same with boys. In summary, sexually active teens are much more likely to be depressed, to self-harm, and to be suicidal. Sex outside of marriage breaks down the heart of the family. This is a quote from Tony Blair. When he was interviewed soon after he became Prime Minister, he said, "Of all the behaviors which in my personal experience has caused the greatest misery to other human beings, I would put adultery pretty high on the list. I don't actually think you can expect a man with the strains of public life to perform adequately unless he has a good home life to go back to." Sexual freedom destroys marriages. Infidelity, the cause of 20 to 40% of divorces in the US. And children are being damaged. Divorce rips children's heart apart. Divorce means cutting off the root of love, says Dr. Sam Moon. Divorce is a huge problem, but there is another, even bigger problem, the disintegration of marriage itself. In 1960, 66% of households in America were headed by a married couple. That meant that most children grew up in such households, as did their friends and extended families. Marriage could certainly be seen as the foundation of the culture, but by 2010, that number of households headed by married couples had dropped to 45%. The 21% drop is more than just a statistic. It has significant practical effects. It means that nearly every child in most parts of America is either in or is close to a family that is not headed by a married couple, which creates an unstable culture affecting wealth, mental health, crimes, etc. And those heartbroken children grow up. They become our youth, which is supposed to be filled with hope and dreams. Statistics show that most children raised in families without the love of two parents who love each other face severe obstacles in life. Let's look at some statistics from the fatherlessgeneration.com. I think that probably you heard some of these, but it's good to review them here. Coming from fatherless homes, we count 63% of youth suicides, 90% of all homeless and runaway children, 85% of all children that exhibit behavioral disorders, 80% of rapists, 71% of high school dropouts, 85% of youth sitting in prison, and we could go on and on and on. What we are seeing here is that there are social consequences to sex outside of marriage. It is not anymore what happens in my bedroom is not of your business. Look at the result. Look at the consequences of the breakdown of the family. We see that it seriously damages the individual, which in essence means that men and women are losing the ability to make lasting commitment to one another. It also causes an undercurrent crippling that individual's ability to live a responsible social life. It is a vicious cycle and America's great moral and social crisis. What about cohabitation? Many relationship experts who don't disagree with cohabitation are nevertheless genuinely concerned about the hidden consequences of it. Those couples who end up marrying divorce more and faster. The couples who cohabit are not happier and cheat on their partners more. Domestic violence is a lot more prevalent among unmarried couples and also more violent. What about the consequences of cohabitation on children? In short, research shows that cohabiting families are usually poorer, which can harm children in many ways. Cohabiting families are often unstable, which also affects children's emotional stability now and for later in life. Then, when the breakdown of the family spreads into the community, what do we get? Violence, crime, sexual diseases, more single parenthood. These things are unsustainable. Businesses can't keep maintaining themselves in this situation, so they run away. And then what happens? Once a family breaks up, there are huge social costs. Again, if you destroy the family, what comes in? Let's look more closely at the social consequences of what happens in the bedroom. On the left picture, this was Detroit, Michigan in 1950, the world capital of the automobile industry. And on the right picture, 60 years later, what happened to Detroit? It filed for bankruptcy in 2013. It was the largest bankruptcy scandal in American history. We look at the number of bankruptcies in the US from 2010 to 2014, and there were 68 municipal bankruptcies or pending bankruptcies during that time alone. We think that now in our nation we have an economic problem, right? The economic cost of treating sexual diseases is huge. The 2022 domestic federal budget allocated to HIV and AIDS was $28 billion. And we can go on and on. When sexual freedom rises, the economy goes down. So once the family breaks down and free sex is rampant, They are huge social costs that have to be borne by the state, meaning the taxpayers. So here's a problem in a nutshell. Two things happen. Number one, it's very expensive, and the people who receive those social benefits generally do not pay them back. So there is a low tax base. What starts as a moral problem ends up as a math problem. And that is what we call bankruptcy. It's that simple. It's not complicated. And everyone can begin to understand that, especially lawmakers, religious leaders, and educators. Everybody says that this makes sense. This is England. Family breaks up costs taxpayers £50 billion a year, which is $63 billion. These are some of the expenses given to the state when families break down. Somebody has to pay for the police, the court, the jails. Healthcare costs rise, social care. Those things are expensive and the cost is rising. Again, this is a universal problem. It's not attributable to one nation or one culture, and not even one period of history. Thanks to the sexual revolution that germinated in the 50s, exploded in the 1960s, flourished in the 70s and never stopped, we have been into a 60-year slide into family and social chaos. Do you have children? Do you have grandchildren? Do you love them? How much? What kind of a world do we want our grandchildren to live in? What kind of a person do we want them to become? Mature, responsible, balanced, creative, and contributing adults? Or troublemakers, suicidal? In fact, in human records, there is no instance of a society retaining its energy after a complete new generation has inherited a tradition which does not insist on sexual abstinence outside of marriage. This is what it means. Unless they are protected, like homeschooled, today's children and our young people do not know what a non-sex saturated society is. They live in it like if it was normal. So, where is the hope? Considering the state of our society in terms of sexuality, is there any hope we can come back to traditional family values? No sex before marriage, no sex outside of marriage. Can monogamy be legislated? What happens when it is? It breaks down anyway, right? So laws are important, but can laws force us to love one person forever? This is a quote from Exposition of the Divine Principle by Reverend Dr. Samuel Moon. There may come a day when human efforts bring an end to social evils, but there is one social vice that human efforts alone can never eradicate. That is sexual immorality. Christian doctrine regards sexual immorality as a cardinal sin, as do other major religions. Our seventh commandment says, "You shall not commit adultery." Exodus 20:14. In Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 3 and 4, it is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable. Jesus took the seventh commandment to a deeper level. In Matthew 5:27-28, he says, You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Nevertheless, a recent study reveals that half of US Christians say that casual sex between consenting adults is sometimes or even always acceptable. It is a growing problem for the clergy as well. Leadership Magazine did a study. Out of 1,000 clergy surveyed, 20% admitted having an affair while they were leading a church community. This is 200 of them, those who admitted it. They are the spiritual leaders of the nation, who should exemplify the standard and show the beauty and the benefit of a deep commitment between husband and wife. What a tragedy that today's Christian society cannot block this path of ruin down, which so many people are rushing blindly. Christianity today has fallen victim to confusion and divisions, and it can only watch helplessly while countless lives are sucked into the maelstrom of immorality. What do you think? Is this exaggerated, or is it our reality? So we are in a state of emergency. We are truly in a state of emergency. I know there is a lot of revival these days, especially within the Christian community. Many young people, Christian or even not, sensing what's going on, are turning back to traditional values. Isn't it awesome? This is very encouraging. Christian organizations are multiplying and working day and night to establish new laws to preserve what is left of this once God-centered nation. But can this be enough to stop sexual immorality sweeping the land more than ever before? The gender confusion, the spread of wicked sex education for children even as young as 2 years old, and the war against parental rights. We are in a war, yes, a spiritual war. I believe that America is at a major crossroads, say a pastor in Ohio. More and more churches are doing a remarkable job with their young people, teaching them the benefits of keeping sex for marriage only. You may be leading one of them. Now, may I ask you, if you knew of a way to bring the preciousness of sexual purity to people at large, would you get involved? Do you hear the calling? I believe that the widespread of sexual sin in this country is the result of Christianity's declined moral authority, leaving it unable to guide society out of the problem, unless something transformative happens within the church. Remember, peace starts at home. Please start with me. Or should we just ignore the problem and hope it goes away? Or hope that someone else will address it? This coming slide is the second most important slide of this presentation. It gives us a lot to think about. It is crucial. We can keep lamenting the decline of our culture, believing the situation is beyond our control, and things, yes, will get worse. Our children, you, families, society, nation, and world are at a major crossroads right now. At the crossroad, we have a choice. We can continue to accept the free sex culture, which was initiated by just a handful of people, and this society will only get worse, both morally and economically. Or we make a change. If we want something different, we must do something different. To ensure our children and grandchildren grow up in a spiritually healthy environment, we must create it. By bringing back the sexual relationship into marriage, we are building a pure love culture. The amazing thing is that once we know the how, it's not even that difficult. It happens naturally, not by force, not by law and punishment, but in a way that responds to the logical mind of today's youth. A logical, creative, and empowering pure love marriage revolution has already started. This is a quote from Dr. Hadja Moon, the Mother of Peace. Marriage is more than a simple coming together of a man and a woman. Through marriage, a new future is created. Societies are formed. Nations are built. God's world of peace is realized with married families at the center. Marriage is therefore sacred. It is worthy to be praised, honored, and upheld in our world today. And we do it publicly. Even in large stadiums, if we make it work, it works. I know, because my husband and I have been part of this revolutionary movement for over 40 years, and we are coming closer and closer to each other every single day. Can you find us here? Oh, here we are. Let's recap what we covered in this session. We learned that stable and thriving societies are founded on strict sexual ethics. We also discovered, if we didn't already know it, that the sexual revolution that began in the 1960s and has continued ever since is the #1 cause of America's current moral and economic decline. We also learned that this is not the first time in human history that this has occurred. At least 19 other civilizations have followed the same path. Historically, all great civilizations have at some point abandoned the values that initially made them prosperous. And then, after about 3 generations, they collapsed. At the beginning of this presentation, we emphasized that we must solve this problem. But how do we solve it? How can we overcome what 19 other flourishing civilizations have failed to overcome? How can a great civilization avoid abandoning monogamous marriages? We need something new, something we have never heard before. How is your wineskin? Are you curious? Are you ready to receive a new and fresh perspective, a new understanding, see a new path filled with new hope? If yes, before we dive into the most important slide of this presentation, let me introduce you to the founders of the Pure Love movement and share a few testimonials. The fundamental goal of the Pure Love Marriage movement is world peace. Creating world peace through ideal couples and ideal families has been the lifelong mission of its founders, Dr. Hadja Moon and her beloved husband of 52 years, the Reverend Dr. Sam-Yu Moon. They have established numerous global organizations that touch every field of human endeavor. However, their greatest contribution to the world is their exemplary marriage. I am sure you're aware that many of the greatest individuals in history, those who are remembered and revered, were often misunderstood, rejected, and even persecuted during their lifetimes. Were they not? I hope you too possess a pioneer spirit and are open to exploring this most beautiful and rewarding path. So far, no one has been able to win the battle against sexual promiscuity and adultery, which have been corrupting mankind. However, the truth of hope that can thoroughly solve this problem has emerged in our age. Now, I am honored to share with you a few compelling testimonials that speaks volumes about the loving influence that Reverend Dr. Samuel Moon and Dr. Hajahan Moon are having in our local community as well as in our world. Let's hear from Bishop Albert Chikuni, who is the founder and president of Family Life Ministries International in Zimbabwe. With the insights presented at the World Summit, it is possible to give solutions to the hurting world. My eyes were open. Please count me as one who will implement all possible solutions according to the vision of Dr. Hajahan Moon. On behalf of all religious leaders and peace-loving citizens, we thank you for your heart for the world. I pledge on behalf of all the organizations I lead that we will fully commit to this noble vision. From Noah, a youth leader in Columbus, Ohio. The process of the pure love marriage blessing allowed my wife and I to do the right things for our relationship before getting married. It gave us a chance to get rid of baggage, bond spiritually, and connect emotionally before we jump into a physical relationship. From a young entrepreneur. Saving intimacy for marriage was as much for my sake as it was for my wife. We were best friends before deciding to get married. We are both very happy that we waited for each other and for that commitment. The attitude of putting each other first has helped us both before marriage and within marriage. In man-woman relations, to one degree or another, we have all erred. But imagine, just imagine, that now you have the tools to build the marriage of your dreams, regardless of how good or bad it currently is. And not only that, but you also have the tools to pass this way of life on to the next generation, your children or your grandchildren, and doing it with others. How does this make you feel? Just thinking about it, doesn't it fill up your heart? In presentation number 2, you will discover 5 revelations, 5 realizations that have convinced me and many others that this dream is within reach. And I have not been disappointed. I'll let you read the titles of the 5 revelations. The recurring problem of the decline of civilization is being solved in our time. Aren't you glad you took the time to see this? This is the last and the most important slide of this presentation. If you think right now that the possibility of building a society of pure love is too good to be true, well, let me tell you what someone I barely knew told me recently. This world is too bad to be true. There has to be something else. Would you like to sign up for the next presentation?